Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have back with us Jeremy Lach, who's the president of Empire Marketing Partners, and we'll be talking about scaling to eight-figure annuity production without burning out. Jeremy, welcome back to the program.
Always great to be here, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I love this title because I think when you start putting numbers to things, it starts getting real, like eight-figure annuity production, and people are already starting to make that calculation in their mind, and obviously the commission structure on this versus that and whatever that is for you, make that calculation. But the point is, raise your mindset, raise your ceiling, raise your believability to know that it's possible to go to eight-figure annuity production. But the most important thing is without burning out, because I'm sure we could all work 22 hours a day and hit some monster number. But then what good are you? You're gone from your family, and you are now, a pile of, desperation. So get us started with where you start working with your advisors to help them even just begin to believe that that's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it is possible, right? I mean, it's really up to the individual advisors, and a lot of advisors are seeing it and believing it today. And there's a lot of advisors that are just kind of stuck, and sometimes it's like, hey, I've got to double that. I've got to double where I'm at here. I mean, in order for me to do that, and in doing so requires so much more work, so much more effort, so much more time away from my family, And Mike, those are all the things that we don't want to see. I mean, at the end of the day, one of the things we like to talk about here at Empire is we want you to be able to enjoy and build and scale your business. But in doing so, you never should have to sacrifice those things that are really important to you. And the most important thing to you is family, right? So, that's what our atmosphere is. That's what our culture is. And we want to help provide those opportunities to you without having to sacrifice those things. But that's immediately what is in the head of a lot of advisors we talk to when they're at it, saying, if I have to double my production, Jeremy, that's a lot more money I got to spend. And that's a lot more time and a lot more energy and a lot more effort. So one of the things that we want to help them first and foremost with is just operational infrastructure. Things have to be in place, from your CRM automation, appointment scheduling systems that you might have in place. And for one, some of our top offices, they've got what they call is defined follow-up cadence. Everything has to be there. So we want to help you build that type of operational infrastructure first and foremost, Mike, because if you don't have that in place, none of this matters. All that automation is going to help you create that consistency, and that's going to allow you to create more capacity just in themselves.
You said a word that I was about to say a quote, because if you remember in our past conversations, we're both quote guys and we love, bringing up quotes and analogies. I was going to say, there's a guy way back in the day by the name of Patterson, and I think he came up with a register company. But the point is, he was known for saying build capacity in advance of demand. Because if you crank up demand and you've got a rocky capacity or foundation or operation, it crumbles, it implodes. So you've got to have those systems in place so that when you start scaling up, you can handle it. And have you ever heard of the acronym for what system stands for?
No, I have not.
So here's a good one. I learned it years ago. It stands for save yourself time, energy, and money. And it's just someone that came up with it, but the SYSTEM, save yourself time, energy, and money. Well, a system will. So talk about what systems a producer has to have in place to make sure that they're on the path to scaling to eight figures, but most importantly, without creating that chaos.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, from your first appointment to the actual delivery of a policy, everything has to be documented and repeatable. Okay. Right. So I'll give you an example. I mean, if every prospect goes through the same discovery process, the same income analysis, the same, recommendation framework, and your growth is going to become a lot more predictable instead of feeling like it's really, really overwhelming to yourself. Right. So the process has to be super clear up front. And if you're a lone ranger, it's super difficult, but you have to make sure you have processes in place. If you have a team, you want to make sure that you've got a team that can execute without supervision, right, Mike? Like you can't be who you are without having a great supporting cast. I can't be who I want to be or who I am without having a great supporting cast. So first of all, you've got to have, that's how you're going to scale without sacrificing any of the experiences, to make sure you have a repeatable delivery from the very beginning to from your first appointment to the delivery of a policy to the cases. Everything should be documented and repeatable. So you have to have some systems that are in place. Yes, we have those as well, whether it's a CRM acquisition, whether it's access to technology that we have. We feel like we definitely have access to technology for the advisors working with us today that has definitely changed their business, definitely changed their lives, because you have to have something that is going to be there to support you. And so you don't have to be constantly worrying about that. Because as you know, Mike, if you're sitting there concerned about every detail from point A to point Z, and you're trying to get yourself involved in that process the entire time along the way, you're going to have a problem. You're going to have issues, and it's going to be harder for you to scale because everything just always seems overwhelming. So processes and technology.
And we could do literally a whole weekend seminar on those two words and still not have scratched the surface enough. So let's just go super high level, 30,000 foot view, talk a little bit about what workflows or systems, and actually a workflow is a subset of a system, because you need to have a system to deliver great client experience. But what are some of the workflows that you've seen, some examples, just to have people clarify in their mind, like, well, what does that actually look like? Because you want to, what would be one of the steps to go to start scaling beyond 7 figures into 8 figures in annuity production? Oh, well, that means you must, and then here's the system. Well, the workflow is now the bullet point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But the main thing to keep in mind is while maintaining a high client experience. So talk a little bit about what that would look like.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the workflow could vary by office, and I've seen it in different firms. And some of our most successful firms, they have a very repeatable process, and basically the client knows exactly what they're going to get in the first 30 days, the first 60 days, the first 90 days. That's the whole onboarding process and the client service model, right? So, ultimately, you have to. They understand. Hey, when I show up, I'm going to take a quiz regarding my, financial situation. They're going to understand their risk tolerance. They're going to go through tax clarity, certain programs that they understand. Hey, within the first 30 days, this is what you're going to do with my firm. So the client already has an expectation of what they're going to do in the first 30 days, the next 60 days, and the next 90 days. And a lot of that is, hey, I'm going to go through tax clarity. I'm going to go through some income questions so they understand what my risk tolerance is. We're going to understand what my objectives are, my goals and objectives. All those things are pretty common in many offices as far as goals and objectives and what they are. But what you do with those in that process, in your appointment process, I've got two firms right off the top of my head that I work with where they don't do anything for at least six appointments. Mike, they go through a whole 6 appointment process because they've got tax issues. They've got estate planning issues. They've got questions on, what their suitability is from what their objectives are financially. Like they want to know what their risk tolerance are, so they want to outlay all those different processes, and they understand, the client knows, hey, in your first 30 days, this is what we're going to ask from you. And this is the information that we're going to need from you in order to get it. And that seems to be, it resonates because obviously these firms are tremendous and they're bringing on a lot of assets in the industry today. But, it works for the particular clients that they're going after because they have a reasonable expectation of what they're supposed to do in those first 30, 60, 90 days.
Yeah. And then I would even say this, probably working with the advisor and you guiding them along that process and going, let's talk about some systems and some SOPs and all of that. And then it's kind of like, I would suspect, like an advisor that says to a client, here's your retirement plan. Come see me in 20 years and let's cross our fingers and hope it worked out. No. We meet quarterly or every 6 months or once a year minimum to double check. So what you just described there with this process and foundation and operational systems, it needs to be constantly like almost bubbling in the back of your mind. Like, okay, was this process working good? Was there any glitch that I could have made it any better? Should I tweak anything? But it needs to be constantly updated, right? To make sure it's working at the level you want it to.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more, for sure.
So let's talk a little bit about at what point an advisor needs to start thinking about shifting from being the primary driver, the rainmaker, the breadwinner, bringing everything in, to building some type of a team, whether it's virtual, in person, whatever the case is. Because if you are a bottleneck, you start impeding progress. And secondly, if one day down the road, maybe you want to maybe step out, whatever that looks like, total sell the practice, or just go, you know what, one day retirement to me looks like working a half a day a week. At some point, you need to not be that person. When does that shift happen?
I think that shift, Mike, happens exactly with the term that you just used. It happens once you realize that you are the bottleneck. You're the reason that business is starting to slow down. So and by the way, if business slows down, Mike, because you take time off, you don't really own a business, right? At that point, you don't own a business. You just own a job. So you have to kind of look at what you're doing with your business. If you're the bottleneck and you're the problem, and you take a day off, or you decide to go on vacation with your family, and again, everything that you're supposed to do, right? By the way, if you do that and everything changes and everything stops and everything slows down, then you just have a job. You don't actually have a business. So what are you trying to build first and foremost? So, that's why I think hiring that operational support, that's going to allow you to do the things that you do well, which, when we talk to our advisors, what's the one thing that they want to do on a daily basis? They want to drive revenue. They want to do revenue generating activity, so if you want to scale your business and you want to grow real scale, that's not going to begin until your income is really not tied directly to everything you do in the industry.
Yeah.
In the business.
It makes me think of something too. I'll bet you that if we pulled on a random 10 advisors that you work with and said, hey, is this an accurate statement? Don't your advisors tell their clients, hey, in retirement, you should be able to do all of these fun things, but don't wait until then to start doing those fun things, because who knows, something could come up. Your health could be depleted. So start doing some of those fun things now, because, we've heard the no-go and the go-go years, all of that. But isn't it the same mentality that you would train your advisors looking to scale? Yeah, one day it would be nice to work a half a day a week and have a team doing all that. But don't wait until age whatever to just do that. Start putting some of those processes in places now at whatever age you're at, because you just never know the timing.
I got an article. This is a great segue, Mike. I received an article today. I've got a brother who's in the industry, and he shared an article with me this morning that talked a lot about, the issues that advisors have as you continue to grow and why they fail. And the reason that advisors are failing is because it's not that they fail, it's that they flatten. And it kind of ties us into the same conversation we're having right now for advisors to want to scale. How do I scale? Well, the problem that becomes with advisors is it's not that, again, it's not failure. It's you flatten, so if you're early on in your career, you're early on in your business, and, there should be one thing that you're focusing on. That's recruiting, going to find, more clients. And guess what? That's what you do, because that's the lifeblood of your business. You're spending all your time recruiting, because if you're in the early stages of it, you're going to be spending your time growing. And I was trying to pull up the article while we were having this conversation, because there was really a couple really good things in there that I saw this morning. But the other part of it's like, if you're already building and you feel that you've built it enough, then you need to make sure that you're focused on something else. And that's called client service, right? You know what I mean? So if you've gotten your business to where you want it to be, you need to make sure that you've got excellent and the best client service and your attention is there. And at the other flip side to it, like you said, if you're scaling and you're at the end and you're like, hey, how do I have something that's sellable? Well, if you're nearing retirement and that's what you're choosing to do, or that's what you're looking for, then you've got to be prepared now to transition your business to others. So those three different phases that you have to look at is where you are at a business. And then if you're looking at why it's flattened, then let's try to solve those problems of why it's flattening, why it's plateaued. Why did we get to that position? That's what it is. If your calendar is full, but you're not growing, then your business has 100% plateaued, Mike.
And you might be the bottleneck. And so here's what I would think, that sometimes it's like the frog in the water. It slowly gets turned up and you don't realize you're getting boiled. But at some point that red flag should come up where you're like, I am back-to-back appointments all day long. And year over year, quarter over quarter, we're just doing the same. At some point, you need to realize that is a problem. So let's go ahead and find someone that can take things off of my plate, because I shouldn't be touching this part, this part, this part. So talk a little bit about, I think, a fear that some advisors would have: hiring before you can afford to.
Absolutely. I mean, and I don't think I look at it as you can't afford not to, right? So,
Right.
and ultimately that is, some people, they hire individuals thinking it's going to automatically help them expand. But again, hiring people that have proper roles, I mean, you have to be able to bring people on. And we definitely help advisors with this and have conversations on that, because you're going to make mistakes. If you haven't hired before, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to probably bring someone on you probably shouldn't have. And the old cliche, the old saying out there is when is the time to fire buddy? And it's fire somebody. And it's probably the time you first felt it. You know what I mean? It's the time to get rid of that individual. But nobody wants to bring people on to get rid of people. We're obviously doing it to scale. So making sure you bring people, you want to hire the people on to bring them on there to do the things that you don't do well. Right. So focus on those things. Again, if I want to focus on revenue generating activities, I want to focus on seeing clients, I want to focus on being on stage, educating clients and prospects. If that's what you want to focus on, then you have to bring people on that are going to do all of those other things that you don't want to do on a daily basis, but not just do them, but do them well, and do them to the expectation that you have, so you don't have issues going forward.
Yep. Perfect. And the only way really to know, like that red flag we mentioned, like, oh, your calendar is so full, but your production is not moving that much, or you go home beat and you're like, man, something has to change. Maybe one thing that you should do is have yourself or an assistant or an AI tool just literally document throughout the day, here's what you did on an hourly basis. Like if you look back over 1 week and we're like, okay, here's what I did every hour for the last 5 days for the work week. What things should I have not touched? And I mentioned AI tool, but there's some tools out there that you just set this tool down just next to you, or it's a pen, or you just turn it on and it just listens all day long, and then it'll categorize and it'll just tell you, oh, well, all day long you did the following, or whatever the case is. What are the things you should not have done? Then that tells you where you should hire. So I think there's a lot of tips that way, but that's one of the ways that you can help an advisor to really get lean so that they create that capacity for the increase in their scaling.
Yeah, and I'll just make one more point on that. And I think that one of the biggest issues that advisors have in our industry, as far as the hiring process, is they don't want to give up control, right? And what we want advisors to understand is delegation isn't about losing control, right? It's about increasing and gaining capacity. So, the highest and best producers in our industry, to your point, what you just mentioned, they protect their time aggressively. They focus on doing the things that they want to be doing that are generating revenue. But helping advisors understand that just because you're delegating, it doesn't mean you're giving up control. It's still your baby.
And guess what? It's kind of like the old saying, if you ask 10 people their opinion about a certain topic, you'll get 14 answers. Well, just ask 10 people. Yeah, but they're going to change. And there's always something that if you were to delegate to an assistant, they're going to do it maybe the same, way you would, maybe a little differently, but the outcome should be still a happy customer, and you need to allow them to have that autonomy. And the only way to do that is to dip your toe in the water, then dip your foot in the water, then put your, whole leg in. And then now all of a sudden it's like, okay, that's cool. It's getting done. I'm not getting complaints. We're working on client experience, all of that, but you just got to get started. So let's think about this when we're thinking about scaling to 8-figure annuity production. What separates advisors who think I'm just going to go the easy route and just buy a bunch of leads? So what separates an advisor that buys leads to those that attracts clients because they're positioned as the expert?
Oh, I love that question. And I love these conversations that I have with advisors on both ends of the spectrum. And again, there's nothing wrong with purchasing leads and going out there. I mean, it's an opportunity to create volume. That's what I'll tell you exactly what purchasing leads does. Purchasing leads just creates volume. Okay. When you are, positioned as an expert, that's when your authority, and I know you love that term, Mike.
Yeah.
But that's when your authority starts to create more attraction. So when you're positioned as, say, a retirement income specialist through workshops and content or media exposure, all those things, people are approaching you and they already trust you. You've already established the trust. So what that does is that dramatically shortens the whole process, right? You know what I mean? So instead of having to convince individuals, you basically just confirm to them what they might already know. So that when I look at the difference of that, I think the biggest thing is authority creates attraction, and leads, they may create volume.
And again, like you said, nothing wrong with the leads, but if you indoctrinate and educate those leads on the authority you have been building, now that's the perfect combination. So authority can, we could talk for hours and hours on that one alone, but many times authority is what you look like online, social media, website, all of that, but also it comes through in your words and your messaging in an email, on your website, and on the Zoom conversation or the in-person conversations. When you can come through with the heart of a teacher and educate and speak with expertise and authority and confidence, because guess what? Competence breeds confidence. So when you're competent about what you're doing because of your experience, it breeds confidence. And when you are confident, you then are recognized as more of an authoritative, but you got to do it in the right way because you got to make sure you're talking about the right things to benefit that client. And it's not just one thing. And that's the beautiful thing about, AI is going to steal my job. No, because AI is a tool. It's a subset of a subset of a subset, that human touch where you listen and understand and ask the right questions and have empathy and teaching. All of that culminates into a relationship. And yes, you can call it expertise and authority and confidence and all of that, but it really gets down to caring about someone and developing that relationship. Would that be an accurate assessment?
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think having brand equity like that, it helps you compound, your business, just like your assets, right? So, I mean, ultimately for me, an example, I mean, obviously if you're known as, if someone looks at you and say, hey, this guy's known as tax efficient retirement income, you know what I mean? For business owners or whatever it is, I'm just pulling out a niche there, but if someone says, hey, I'm known for tax efficient retirement income for business owners, that is so much more powerful of a message than just generic retirement messaging, right? Simple stuff that you just do so all this specific positioning like that and having that authority and brand authority, that's just going to allow you to do one thing more than others. And that's attract higher quality people, so the clearer that is, then the stronger, the clearer that is, and the stronger I don't know what term I'm looking here for, but the stronger
the outcome. I guess, you know what I mean? I'm going to go even one step further. Tax efficient retirement income for physicians. Tax efficient retirement income for engineers. So if you can take that narrowing and go, I'm going to become the expert in whatever, in your example, tax efficient retirement income, but really become that expert for a specific vertical category demographic, like, high affluent, physicians who own their own practice or whatever the case is. Now it's like, okay, hold up. Yes, I can work with anybody because a retirement plan can work for anybody. But when I become the expert in this outcome for this demographic, man, 6, 9, 12 months down the road, word gets around. We could go, really down that path, but I really like that specificity you mentioned there. And so let's wrap up with this, Jeremy. If someone is listening to this thinking, hey, 8-figure annuity production with operations and systems, if they come to you, what is one of the first steps that you would take to help guide them on that path and get launched that way?
Well, I mean, we have a little bit of an interview process just to vet the advisors that we're working with to have those conversations. And ultimately, it's just learning, like, what are your objectives? Like, what do you want to do? How do you want to build your brand? If you're not building your brand, how do you want to build your brand? Because in all reality, I don't really want to work with an advisor, or I shouldn't say I don't want to work with a guy. That doesn't sound very nice to make that comment. Mike, but ultimately to me, it's like where I feel like our systems and our process are going to benefit people is you want a brand and you want to build you're trying to grow your company. You're trying to build your brand. You're not just chasing the simple lead systems. Everybody's got all that stuff. What we want to differentiate ourselves from the other guys. We want to help people build out and grow their brand. We want to help create that authority that they need so they can start creating some attraction to people. Simple, Q&A through some process we go through. And, ultimately to me, like we want to do this. We are the IMO that is going to be invested in your future. And we know that partnership is going to help us sustain, the growth that we want to do, but it's also going to put you on the path that you want to create to create those better opportunities for you to spend more time with your families, but yet get your business on autopilot. How do I do that and have success? And
everybody
we
wins.
Definitely feel like we can help with that. Absolutely. Everybody wins in that situation. You got it.
Well, if someone is interested in taking a peek at that path, what's the best way they can learn more and reach out and connect with you?
Yeah, I definitely would go to our website, Mike, and that's www.empiremps. That's Matt, Paul, Sam. So empiremps.com. Check out our website. You can get some information on me, a little bit on our programs. You will have access to, obviously you get, being the president of that company, Mike, you get direct access to me, the decision maker. So love that. Being the small boutique feel that we have is you're always going to get Jeremy. We're going to be able to have a conversation to talk about what we think is going to be beneficial for you once we learn a little bit more about what makes you awesome. So, and if you're not where you want to be, I promise you, we're going to put opportunities in front of you that can help. If not, I think we'll enjoy the conversation anyways.
Perfect. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for coming back on. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you.
It's always great to talk to you, Mike. And again, I appreciate you having me as always.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.